Hello my friends and welcome. We have some awesome update from the south. The Ukrainian landing operation goes successfully. Ukrainian army takes the ground each day. It is confirmed that Ukraine has expanded the bridgehead across the Antonovsky Bridge in its motorway and railway parts. So this area is confirmed to be cleared from the Russian occupiers, but Russians continue to use the aviation bombs to target our positions. So far unsuccessfully, our guys are still on the shore, and moreover moving forward, especially over here there is the road that leads to the nearby village, and Ukraine actively uses the surveillance in many of the places, for example here, there and over here in Oleshki. It means that Ukraine is getting ready for something. Maybe instead of performing quite a risky operation landing in Crimea, Ukraine has decided to achieve the goal across the Dnieper. Well, at least according to the recent news, Ukraine sends more and more reinforcements to Kherson Oblast. The biggest settlement in the area is Oleshki, small town I would say, and Russia still controls the road which leads to the place. However, Ukraine already attacked this road many times using FPV drones and artillery. Also, there is the Russian defense line in this particular area, so Ukraine might try to advance from this place. As I told you, there is quite a useful road and it is not that protected compared to this road, so Ukraine may simultaneously actually advance using two of the roads trying to encircle Oleshki, but for that we need more reinforcements and obviously armored vehicles, which are reportedly were sent already to this part. Not many of them, but still. We also have the update of the Ukrainian advancement near to Novofedorovka and Verbove on the south direction, which used to be the main vector of Ukrainian counterattack. Well, we don't have the update on the deep state military map. I was waiting it for a very long time, so I decided to film the video without it. So hopefully we'll have update for tomorrow, but it will be for sure, my friends. The Ukrainian soldiers moved ahead, and yes, indeed, we have the confirmation about it on this side. The advancement happened over here and over here. As you can see, Russia uses quite a lot of the artillery systems and anti-tank missiles to cope with the Ukrainian advancement, but Ukraine still takes the ground and also uses artillery in Verbove. The Verbove village is on the lower ground compared to Novoprokopivka, so it's much easier to advance towards this place. Let's go to Avdiivka town. Russia has the light advancement today over here on the south, taking one of the fields. It is not good because they're getting closer to cut the main supply for Ukrainian army, but from the south they're still far away. From the north they're much closer. Plus there are some natural obstacles in this area, different elevation, couple of the rivers, so it's not easy for them to advance from the south. They'll have to take some of the engineering equipment if they want to cross those, and that makes them vulnerable against the Ukrainian artillery fire. It seems like they do not have the single vector of their attack. They're just trying many ways. Whether they will be successful or not, they're trying to find the biggest spot in Ukrainian defense, so they have four of the vectors in different directions. Yeah, sadly that Russia was able to accumulate resources for Avdiivka attack, and they're still getting more resources for one more big jump. Analytics around the world are telling about this story. Before, Ukraine was successful taking some of the ground in this area, trying to reach the Donetsk airfield, but unsuccessfully, as you see. This time in this sector the initiative belongs to Russia, but also it's quite profitable situation for Ukraine if Russia is unsuccessful in circling the city, because we are in defense and we are losing much less forces compared to the Russian army. The ratio now there is 1-to-6, 1-to-7, something like that. But again, a Russian army doesn't care about their losses. The Russian generals do not care, and they continue to send them basically to die in Avdiivka, but at some particular point they might take the ground because they're moving with many of the waves with more reinforcements. For the first time since the start of the Russian attack attempts on Avdiivka, they performed the big night attack. So usually they do it during the daytime because they do not have the special equipment. Well, they have some, but it's not as good as on Ukrainian side, because we have supplies from our allies from the West. So we have the thermal cameras, night vision, but Russians, well, I wouldn't say that those tools are great on the Russian side. Nevertheless, they sent the convoy, and what happened? Ukraine spotted the convoy and again launched the artillery attack, with the same result for the Russian occupiers. All of them were just devastated. And here is the scene during the daytime. There are lots of the Russian BTRs, and probably infantry was inside of those vehicles. Russians even sent some of their tanks to the place. They all were devastated again and again. Insanity. About this case, then Russia put lots of the soldiers near to that track. More than 20 soldiers were counted by my subscribers on Telegram. By the way, my friends, support me please on Telegram, because there I post something that I'm unable to post on YouTube. I choose the Telegram as my alternate platform because of the low censorship basically. Plus, it is very useful for me. I can share the news from my phone directly. So even if I'm on a trip somewhere and I'm doing my own stuff, I can still share the news with you. It's awesome. Okay, from this spot is the result, the strike, the kaboom on this particular track. I think it is very precise. As I say to you, we're still waiting for the full video. Obviously, I'll share it on my Telegram channel. And it's quite interesting what was used by Ukrainian army to target that track. It doesn't look like the HIMARS shell, or it is quite big. Also, it doesn't look like JDAM. Well, we'll see anyways. As it was reported, the Russian modern S-300B4 system, maybe not modern but unique, was kaboomed by Ukrainian army. Probably Ukraine used the cruise missiles to reach this stuff. However, we are still in lack of video or photo confirmation, so for me personally, it's hard to say what was really targeted over there. But today we had reports about the kabooms happening not far away from Sevastopol. Also, the temporary occupied hotel, which was converted to the Russian base, was targeted in Skadovsk, that's the southern part of Ukraine. Russia reports about the losses in their officers and soldiers. One more Russian Salzburg artillery system with thermal barrel shells was targeted. Indeed, Salzburg provides us with the most spectacular firework than it kabooms. Here is from the other camera. Sorry about the watermark, I cannot remove it. This is the sign of our battalion or something. Okay, we have the confirmation from the deep state military map that Ukraine took some of the ground on the southern front lines near to Verboe and Novopokrovka village. Awesome. Sometimes Russian soldiers are just very lucky. They use those minivans to supply their armors and other stuff to the front lines, including infantry. So as you saw, there is the hole in the roof and there is the hole on the bottom, which goes all directly to the ground. Unfortunately, Ukraine used the anti-tank shell, that is why it happened like that. Russia has modernized their drones. Now they use 2 of the shells. The purpose of the first shell is to eliminate the defense of the vehicle, the possible defense like anti-drone nets that you have already spotted in many of the photos and videos. So we may see it over here, the Ukrainian Bradley and the Russian Lancet. You also can see 2 of the explosions. One is to hit the anti-drone defense, the other one is to penetrate the vehicle armor. So definitely it will be the pain in the ass for Ukrainian army, and unfortunately we do not have the analogs of the Lancet drones. We are still researching what drones we might use against the Russian vehicles, but they have already the massive production of those drones, so in this way they are winning. But we have more FPV drones compared to the Russian army, so those do the job. But the range of Lancet is obviously much longer compared to FPV drone. Finally, we have the confirmation, the photos with a good resolution where you may see the marks. Those are the small grenades which were supplied to Ukraine by Serbia, and the shells are made in 2023, so this year. Awesome, Serbia, thank you so much for your support. Some say that Serbia is pro-Russian, but they support Ukraine with grenades. At least it's awesome. This evening there were some reports that the Russian airfield in Rostov-on-Don was attacked, but we don't have the video or photo confirmation about it. The good thing that Russia has deployed many of the S-400 systems here, and hopefully they were targeted. I already told you about this airfield a couple of times and those systems, so I expect them to be targeted because it's very tasty target. Okay, one more night attack that Russia had performed in Avdiivka. They even used the T-90, the best Russian tank, as Putin says recently, and it was kaboomed with the help of the drone. They also used T-72 that was targeted and some of the armored vehicles. All of that is just rubbish. Or you may call it the scrap metal. Around 4 days ago there was the Ukrainian attack on the Russian headquarters, the group the Dnieper they call them, and Russia immediately lost 3 of the colonels, the main commanders of the southern front lines. All of them were the commanders of the paratroop divisions that were sent from Pskov to the southern part of Ukraine near to Robotyne. It is the huge loss for the Russian army, indeed. Just remember the Ukrainian attack on Pskov Russian airfield, then Russia lost many of the airplanes. Well, this is, I think, even more devastating for the paratroop divisions of Russians. And here we have the story of one Russian hero, also from the Davydov, from what I can judge from this parachute symbol. So what do Russians write about him? Well, the name of the guy was Ramzanov Akbar. He was the head of the group. He was performing the mission in Ukraine during the special military operation. They still call the war special military operation. He bravely conducted his duties, he secured the country, he fought for justice, usual blah blah blah. He's the hero, our hero. There were even some billboards in Russia with his picture and says that glory to the Russian hero, Akbar Ramzanov. But do you know what usually happens to the memory of the Russian heroes? It is like that. Akbar Ramzanov is now protecting the sand in a local construction spot from the precipitation. Yes, it is real Russia and their attitude towards their own heroes. To some other news, the European Union now tries to find the alternate way to supply the ammunition to Ukrainian army because Hungary put their own veto on those supplies. Hungarian government, well, thank you so much, you puppets of Russia. Just recently Slovakia joined that club, but they are not as aggressive as Hungary in supporting Russia. The Czech president says that Ukraine doesn't have the military advantage over Russia and time works in favor of the Russian Federation because they may accumulate more resources, they basically have more population and they may still produce lots of the weaponry. That is why he thinks that finally there will be the peace talks that might start the next year. Well, we'll see. President Zelensky says that there will be no any talks with the Russian Federation with their current leader, Putin. Meanwhile, the Czech Republic will continue to train Ukrainian soldiers till the end of 2024 at least. The program was extended. The Hungarian Minister of the Foreign Affairs says that Ukraine will not join the European Union by the time that the war continues. There is no freedom of speech or freedom of elections in Ukraine. Well, actually, the elections in Ukraine are very clear and they are very democratic. I think you'll not find those democratic elections in many of the European countries, especially Hungary. It looks like Ukrainian people do not like the Ukrainian presidents usually. That's why they tend to change them every term. We had already 6 presidents and only one took 2 of the terms consecutive. Well, maybe this guy says like that because President Zelensky tends to cancel the elections during the state of war. Well, actually, my opinion that elections should be conducted in Ukraine in any case. But it is just my opinion, we'll see how it goes. But the Hungarian government is not the only cringe generator towards Ukraine. Let's listen to Vivek Ramaswamy, the candidate from the Republican Party for the president's chair next year. Wow, let's see what he says.
The first half of this race, I was the only person standing for it. Now they're actually quietly coming around to being more cautious, as they should. Level with the American people here. Ukraine is not a paragon of democracy.
Partially, yes, he is right. We are developing democratic state. Unfortunately, because of the war, some of the rights of our citizens were restricted. I think it's normal thing. In United States, you also have the law which restricts the human rights in case of the war. And if the United States Army is not enough, the United States normal citizens participate in one or other way in the war. So the current restrictions in Ukraine are understandable. About the democratic or not democratic state, I think that Ukraine is the democratic state compared to many of the, let's say, democratic countries. First of all, we have the freedom of speech. Everyone in Ukraine may criticize Zelensky, Ukrainian government, even during the state of war. I did it also sometimes in my videos because of the corruption, which I think is the biggest problem for Ukraine, not the democracy. Let's continue listen to this pure genius.
This is a country that has banned 11 opposition parties.
Okay, 11 opposition parties to what? To Ukraine itself, because all of those parties were integrated into Ukrainian political life to divide society and to put the Russian influence in Ukraine. He didn't say anything of that. Those 11 opposition parties were not fluffy parties. They were used to destroy Ukraine as the country and put the puppet government in Ukraine. Unfortunately, throughout the Ukrainian independence, Russia got the influence in Ukraine using those parties and movements. At some certain periods, Russia even had the power in Ukraine. Then, for example, Yanukovych and his party was leading in Ukrainian political life. Then he became the president, but people didn't like it, so there was the revolution in 2014. Russia didn't like that they lost the influence, so they annexed Crimea and created the self-proclaimed republics of DPR and LPR. Ukraine should have blocked those parties long time ago. Because of that influence, currently we have the war in Ukraine.
It has consolidated all media into one state TV media arm.
He says about the news marathon. Well, actually, many people do not like that many of the media sources speak constantly, mostly the same picture. But there are some other channels and alternate media that you may watch, read, and no one blocks that. If you switch, for example, to Fifth channel, which belongs to Poroshenko or affiliated to Poroshenko, the former Ukrainian president, there you'll see lots of the critics towards the current Ukrainian government and personally to Vladimir Zelensky, and no one blocks that during the state of war.
That's not democratic. It has threatened not to hold elections this year unless the U.S. forks over more money.
Well, it's kind of concerned me as well. As I told you, I support the elections in Ukraine no matter what. But according to Ukrainian constitution, the main law, if we have the state of war, the elections might be cancelled, and President Zelensky asked allies to provide more funds if they want Ukraine to conduct elections. I'm 100% sure that Zelensky will be elected in those elections, so it's not a problem for him personally.
That is not democratic. It has celebrated a Nazi in its ranks, the comedian in cargo pants.
Here I didn't understand whom he called Nazi. Zelensky, who is Jew himself. If he says something about Nazi ruling Ukraine or something like that, it means that he got his paycheck from Kremlin.
And called Zelensky, doing it in their own ranks. That is not democratic. More facts for you that you won't hear from the mainstream in either party or the mainstream media. The regions of Ukraine that are occupied by Russia right now, in the Donbass, Luhansk, Donetsk, these are Russian-speaking regions that have not even been part of Ukraine since 2014.
No, those regions are still part of Ukraine legally, together with Crimea, by the way. Definitely this political clown is in lack of understanding what is really happening in my country. He provides his own bias and speculation about the events happening somewhere else, but because of those events many people were killed and are being killed, but he uses it as his political preference, saying that he knows the topic. pure political speculation on human lives. If we speak about 2014, no one helped Ukraine by that time. Yes, some sanctions were implemented on Russia, but they didn't help. If you check out every resource, what happened in Donbass in 2014, we're not speaking about the Crimean annexation. The Russian forces clearly took that peninsula under control with their regular armed forces, but in Donbass they sent their own citizens. For example, Strelkov was in charge of the group of people that went to Slavyansk, taking the city under control and then spread around Donbass, calling many to join them. Yes, most of the population on the eastern side and on the south are Russian-speaking. I'm the Russian speaker myself because I'm originally from Crimea, from Sevastopol, but it doesn't make me less Ukrainian. You see, the Russian language doesn't really belong to Russia itself. It was the main language of the Soviet Union. The education, all of the paperwork was on Russian in the Soviet Union. So all of the republics, the older generation like me, we know Russian. In Uzbekistan, in Ukraine, even in Moldova. Plus, Eastern Germans know some Russian because they had that language in their school program. For now, not anymore, but the older generation of the Eastern Germans, they know some Russian. So why not to put them into the Russian Federation? He just justified it.
Those are the hard facts. And so to frame this as some kind of battle between good versus evil, don't buy it.
Actually, it is the battle between good and evil. And I'm very happy that Ukraine is on the bright side, the side of democracy, not the autocracy. He tries to sell that Russia is the same looking state as Ukraine. Don't buy it.
And I'd like the likes of the sharpest of the war hawks on Ukraine, Nikki Haley, to have some accountability and answer. Do you want to use U.S. taxpayer money to fund the banning of Christians? That is actually what's happening. They're using the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. They have banned them. The Ukrainian...
Okay, I have something to say about the Orthodox Church. It seems like he doesn't understand the topic at all. Ukraine is mostly the Orthodox Christian country, but also we have Catholics on the western side of the country and Protestants. There are some Muslims too, but not many. Most of them are in Crimea. Crimean Tatars. So, as for the Orthodox Church, we have the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, but after the Soviet Union collapse, there was the Moscow Church in Ukraine. So the main church was in Moscow and Ukrainian Church was just one branch of it. It continued for a very long time, then finally 5 years ago Ukrainian Church got validated, let's say, as the result of the special meeting of all of the leaders of the other churches. By the way, the Moscow Church wasn't presented in that meeting, but finally Ukraine has the legal right to have its own church without the Russian influence, because many people just go to the churches and Russian propaganda also spread around them. Not a long time ago, they even prayed for the health of the Patriarch Kirill, who blesses the Russian weaponry and Russian soldiers to go and fight in Ukraine. Also, when Russia started the full-scale war in Ukraine, there were numerous of the Russian or pro-Russian priests in the Moscow churches trying to help the Russian army. Also, they called the people around, go and help Russians. After that, many of the church communities decided to change from the pro-Russian vector to Ukrainian legal church. Russians didn't like it, so they started to spread the narrative that Ukraine just kills the Christian church in its own territory. It is not even close to that. We just eliminate the Russian influence in Ukraine. And the church branch, the Moscow branch, was one of the main levers to start the war in Ukraine, to brainwash the people with Russian propaganda, because after every ceremony they start to say about something like Ukraine, Russia, Belarus is the united nation. I know it 100% because I went to the Moscow church many times. I was baptized in the Ukrainian pro-Moscow church, and they do not recognize the Ukrainian church. They provide the division, the national division in Ukraine. Wow, I have so many counter-arguments to his speech. He is really a populist politician. It's terrible what is happening in the United States politics, actually, if you have those kind of the candidates.
Parliament just did this last week, supported by our dollars, and I think you owe it to the American people, Nikki, to at least this one time at least condemn.
Thank you. That's time.
At least to
Mr.
condemn
Ramaswamy,
their...
Finally, someone shut him up. I have just one thing to add. Then he spoke about the Russian language. I forgot to say it. Russia bombs the Ukrainian cities. Most of those are Russian-speaking cities, like Kharkiv. The Mariupol was totally demolished, so Russia is fighting against the citizens who speak Russian. And mostly, if you ask people in those areas, they do hate Russia a lot. So they do speak Russian, but they hate Russia with all their hearts because they lost their homes, they lost their loved ones. Putin basically did everything for Ukraine to hate him personally and for Ukrainians to hate Russia. Even those Ukrainians who were neutral to Russia or in some way supportive to them. Well, hopefully running for the president's chair is the biggest political achievement of this Mr. Cringe. And you know, I was just checking the news and here I saw the Russian attack on Kherson Oblast and what they did to the church, that is the Christianity of Russia. They just shelled the Ukrainian churches, and probably this one was the Ukrainian church of the Moscow's Patriarchy. Who knows? Because we still have those churches around. I would ban those, but you know, we have democracy. Definitely the Russian peace is the pure evil. Cringe continues. Putin went to some of the local hospital in Moscow to visit the patients who fight with cancer. Now in Russia it's very hard to fight against that disease because of the lack in medical care. Nevertheless, for Putin everything is fine. So here is the mother and her kid who doesn't want to see Putin and just pulls on the blanket not to see this evil. But mother pulls the blanket down. It's just terrible scene to see, very cringy. He says, let it off. And he covered himself from this evil. Maybe because he just afraid to go on his own procedures, because chemo might be very painful, plus all of those needles. Obviously, the kid is scared. He thought that it is the new doctor who wants to take him for the procedures, which he hates. So he tries to cover himself, but mother and pulls, she laughs and pulls the blanket down. Speak with Putin, and Putin tries, okay, what's your name, what's your name? And the boy says, mother, like shows mother, go away, I want to hide. That's the normal reaction for every child. And quite a stupid reaction from the mother's side, trying to show her scared kid to this Vladimir Putin. He is probably more important for her than her own child. My friends, please don't forget to press the like to this video, and also if you want to support my job, there will be some of the links in the video description just below. You may support me on Patreon or just on the sponsorship of this YouTube channel. My sponsors, thank you so much for your kind support. I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time.